Welcome to Animal Quests. I'm Austin. Today I'm taking you to see what happens when brutal animal attacks are recorded on social media. From a cougar stalking a runner on GoPro to an elephant charge filmed by bystanders in Sri Lanka. First, I'll start in South Africa, where a drone operator filming surfers was about to capture something from above that nobody in the water could see. It was November 15th, 2016, and a calm spring morning had settled over the False Bay coastline south of Cape Town. The tide was low, there was barely any wind, and the morning light and calm surface made visibility from the drone unusually good despite the cold coastal water. Kinda one of those mornings where you could actually make out shapes from the cliff tops pretty easily. The warmer water temperatures had brought seasonal bait fish closer to shore, drawing larger predators into the shallow coastal zone. Ruan Geldenhuys was a 33-year-old competitive amateur surfer from Muizenberg who had been riding this stretch of coastline for over a decade. He knew the area had shark activity. Everyone who surfed around there did, but he pretty much dismissed it the way every local does. He'd never had an encounter, and that was basically enough for him. His wife had asked him more than once to switch to a different break, but Ruan kept coming back because the wave was good, and nothing had ever happened. Christoph Badenhorst, 28, was a drone hobbyist and content creator who spent most clear mornings flying his drone over the lineup from the cliffs above, posting aerial surf footage online. He had been filming this break for months and knew the water really well from above. He'd built up a decent following posting these clips, and the surfers down below had gotten used to seeing his drone buzzing around overhead. On this particular morning, he launched the drone over about 5 surfers sitting in the lineup, and the footage was really clean. Blue-green water, white sand bottom, surfers showing up as dark shapes from about 60 meters up. The morning tide and calm conditions made spotting things from above way easier than usual, which is partly why Christoph saw what he saw. About 20 minutes into filming, the drone's camera picked up a large dark silhouette consistent with what investigators later described. It was a great white, moving parallel to the break roughly 40 to 50 yards from the nearest surfer. Christoph saw it on his monitor almost right away, but by the time he processes what he's looking at, there's no practical way to warn anyone in the water from up on the cliffs. That gap between seeing the danger from above and being completely helpless to stop it is what makes this footage so hard to watch. I've watched aerial shark footage before, but this one got to me differently. There's a man on a screen 60 meters below you, and something is swimming toward him, and you can see all of it perfectly, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing, you can do about it. The clarity is what makes it cruel. If the water had been murky, Christoph never would have seen it coming, and at least he wouldn't have to carry that. Great white sharks patrol the False Bay inshore zone during warmer months following seasonal prey migrations. Adults commonly exceed 14 feet and 2,000 pounds. Their hunting strategy against seals usually involves this rapid vertical strike from below, hitting with enough force to partially breach the surface. From below, a surfer on a board basically looks just like a seal. Most attacks on surfers involve a single investigatory bite, but the force of that initial strike alone can cause fatal blood loss. The drone footage shows the silhouette changing course and accelerating toward Ruan's position. The strike came from directly below. The footage shows this massive disturbance at the surface, the board bucking violently and folding under the impact, and Ruan just disappearing under the white water for a second. Other surfers in the lineup scattered immediately. One surfer roughly 40 yards away later described hearing a heavy impact, then seeing blood spreading across the surface. Ruan resurfaced briefly, before losing coordination, injuries visible in the water around him. Other surfers paddled toward him. 2 reached him and attempted to bring him to shore. The bite had done catastrophic damage to his lower body, basically severing major blood vessels, and he lost consciousness during the paddle in. Beachgoers and lifeguards met them at the waterline. Emergency services were called. Ruan went into cardiac arrest during transport and could not be revived at the hospital. 2 surfers paddled into blood-clouded water to bring their friend to shore, knowing full well what had just hit him. I keep coming back to that because it's the part of this story that doesn't get talked about enough. The shark was still in the area, and they went anyway. Every survival instinct in their bodies was telling them to paddle the other direction, and they didn't. Christoph's drone footage was turned over to investigators and eventually circulated locally before getting picked up by larger outlets. The animal was never identified or pursued, consistent with South African wildlife policy. Christoph later said in an interview that he still flies the drone but has not been able to watch the footage again. The disconnect in that footage, seeing everything from above while the person in the water sees nothing, that's the part I keep turning over. The next story has almost the opposite problem though. In Kenya, the danger was visible to everyone. Every tourist in every vehicle had their phone pointed right at it, and it still wasn't enough to stop what happened next. It was August 8th, 2015, and the dry season had drawn enormous herds across the Masai Mara, pulling some of the highest predator concentrations in East Africa into the open grasslands. Safari vehicle traffic was really heavy, and the vehicles were honestly positioned closer than park guidelines technically recommend, which is pretty common during peak migration season. Sigrun Halldórsdóttir was a 44-year-old Icelandic corporate attorney on her first African safari, booked through a premium tour operator as a birthday gift from her husband. She had basically zero African wildlife experience, but had been posting photos to her social media the entire trip, really curating the whole thing. Every meal, every sunset, every animal sighting got its own post. Her feed from the first 3 days of the trip looks like a luxury travel ad, and I think that framing matters because it tells you something about how she was processing the experience. This wasn't wilderness to her, it was content. Her guide, Baraka Molel, 38, was a Maasai-trained safari professional with 12 years of experience operating in the Mara. He conducted his standard safety briefing before every game drive. Remain seated. Nothing extends beyond the vehicle silhouette. No standing through the pop-top roof when animals are within roughly 50 meters. Baraka had guided hundreds of clients through the Mara without a serious incident, but colleagues later said he had privately gotten pretty frustrated with tourists who treated the game drives like theme park rides. The vehicle found a pride of 7 lions resting in open grass about 30 meters from the track. 4 other vehicles were already parked nearby with passengers filming from windows and roof hatches. Sigrun had been shooting through the open pop-top while seated. The photos were fine, but not the close-range content she had been posting throughout her trip. She stood fully upright through the pop-top roof, her head and torso well above the vehicle roofline, silhouetted against the sky. Baraka told her to sit down immediately. She waved him off and continued filming. Passengers in surrounding vehicles were already recording the lions, and at least 2 cameras happened to be pointed at Sigrun's vehicle too, which is basically how we have multiple angles of what happened next. What sits with me about this one is that Baraka did everything right. He gave the briefing, he gave the warning, he gave the direct order to sit down, and she waved him off because the photo mattered more. I've thought about what else he could have done, and the answer is physically pull her down, which isn't something a guide in that position can really do to a paying client. African lions are ambush predators that key on isolated, elevated, or silhouetted shapes that break from a group profile. Safari vehicles are generally safe because lions perceive the vehicle as a single large shape. When a person stands above the roofline, the human silhouette separates from the vehicle outline and can trigger a rapid predatory or defensive response, particularly in females. This is among the most well-documented risk factors in safari vehicle incidents. Footage from the vehicles nearby shows a lioness that had been resting with her head down suddenly shift her gaze towards Sigrun's vehicle. You can see the ears go forward, the body drop lower, and honestly, if you know what you're looking at, your stomach just drops. The lioness covered the distance in only a few seconds. Baraka shouted. Sigrun did not drop fast enough. The lioness launched upward toward the silhouette above the roofline. Shaky footage from adjacent vehicles captures the impact and Sigrun being slammed against the roof opening as the lioness maintained its grip. Witnesses reported the lioness holding on for several seconds as Baraka fought to pull Sigrun back inside. The lioness eventually released and dropped to the ground. Baraka started the engine and drove away from the pride immediately. Sigrun had sustained deep claw and bite wounds to her shoulders, neck, and head, with severe neck trauma from the sustained bite. Baraka radioed for emergency support and drove toward the nearest airstrip. The nearest medical facility that could actually handle trauma like that was hours away by road, which is kinda the reality of the Mara. Sigrun succumbed to her injuries before the medical evacuation aircraft arrived. Multiple cameras caught the whole thing from multiple angles, and nobody behind any of those cameras could do a single thing about it. I find that really hard to sit with. The idea that footage exists of someone's last moments, captured by strangers in neighboring vehicles who were just there to see lions. Footage from tourist vehicles briefly circulated in local WhatsApp groups and travel forums before wider outlets picked it up. The investigation cleared Baraka of any negligence, noting he issued clear warnings that were disregarded. The concession reinforced its safety protocols. Baraka kept guiding in the Mara, but colleagues said he got noticeably more forceful with clients about safety rules after that, physically blocking the pop-top on multiple occasions when animals were close. Kenya showed me what happens when dozens of cameras are rolling and nobody can intervene. The footage from Indonesia hit differently though, because the phones weren't pointed at someone ignoring a warning. They were pointed at a group of men trying to do something about a 20-foot snake, and the cameras kept rolling because the people holding them were simultaneously trying to save their friend. It was March 22, 2017, and heavy wet season rains had flooded drainage ditches across a palm oil plantation in central Sulawesi. The flooding was basically pushing all kinds of wildlife out of the ditches and into the rows between palms, which is pretty normal during the wet season out there. The ditch water was knee-deep and brown, the kind of water where you can't see your own feet, let alone something coiled up underneath the surface. The estate covered thousands of hectares of converted rainforest. Large reticulated pythons were a known presence on the plantation, occasionally taking dogs and goats. Workers had an informal understanding: leave the big ones alone. They keep rat populations manageable. But that understanding kind of breaks down when the snake shows up right next to a path your crew walks every morning. Because at that point, it's not about respecting the wildlife anymore. It's about someone eventually stepping on it in the dark. Hartono Pasolang, 45, had worked the same estate for over 15 years. His crew of 8 discovered a massive python, estimated between 18 and 20 feet, coiled in a flooded drainage ditch between palm rows. Several workers started filming on their phones right away, which is kind of just what people do when they find something like that. Vertical phone footage, shaky, everyone talking over each other. Nobody was thinking about social media strategy. They were just pointing their cameras at the biggest snake they'd ever seen. Rather than leaving it alone, the group decided to try to move it because the python was really close to a footpath workers used every day. And honestly, a snake that size sitting next to a walking route is a genuine safety concern that nobody wanted to just ignore. 4 men grabbed ropes and poles. The most experienced worker in the group took the lead position near the snake's head. He had handled smaller pythons before. The footage from the workers' phones is chaotic in a way that's hard to describe unless you've seen it. Vertical, shaky, the camera swinging between the snake and the faces of the men trying to rope it. These aren't people filming for content. They're filming because something insane is happening 3 feet in front of them, and their hands don't know what else to do. Reticulated pythons are the longest snakes on Earth, with confirmed specimens exceeding 25 feet. When provoked or restrained, they strike with surprising speed, latching with backward curving teeth before wrapping coils around the target. Large constrictors incapacitate prey primarily through circulatory restriction and positional asphyxia, tightening incrementally with each exhalation and preventing the next breath. The python struck when the rope contacted its body, latching onto Hartono's right arm with its jaws, the backward curving teeth locking immediately. Workers' footage shows the snake getting its first coil around his upper body within seconds and wrapping further around his torso before the workers could organize an effective response. Hartono went to the ground. His co-workers rushed in with machetes and poles. The problem was that the workers couldn't safely cut near Hartono without striking him, and they wasted critical seconds trying to figure out where to hit. The snake was thrashing violently every time someone swung at it, making clean blows basically impossible. The footage becomes pure chaos at this point, cameras swinging, men shouting, the sound of machetes striking scale and heavy tissue. Workers eventually killed the python with repeated strikes, but the process took several minutes. By the time the coils were removed, the constriction had critically restricted both breathing and circulation. Hartono didn't regain consciousness. Supervisors loaded him into a vehicle and tried to get him to the nearest clinic, but he showed no signs of consciousness during transport and was pronounced dead on arrival. I keep thinking about the phones. The men holding them were trying to save their friend with one hand and still holding the camera with the other because they didn't think to put it down. That footage exists because panic doesn't follow logic. Nobody thought to stop recording. Nobody had the bandwidth to think about anything except the snake. The original phone uploads were removed within days, but copies had already spread across Indonesian social media and were eventually picked up by international outlets. The estate reviewed its wildlife encounter protocols and issued new guidelines prohibiting workers from attempting to handle or relocate large pythons without trained wildlife response. Indonesia's footage is shaky and vertical and chaotic because the people filming were also fighting for someone's life. The footage from California is the opposite: steady, chest-mounted, perfectly framed, because the camera was strapped to the person it was about to outlive. It was October 4th, 2014, and the San Gabriel Mountains above Los Angeles were dry and warm heading into early autumn. The chaparral was brown and crispy, and the trails were pretty much empty by late afternoon, right around when mountain lions start getting active. Linnea Sandquist was a 31-year-old marketing analyst from Pasadena who ran a narrow single-track trail in the Front Range foothills most weekends, posting edited clips online from a chest-mounted GoPro. Mountain lion activity in the San Gabriels was well documented, and there were warning signs at basically every trailhead. but Linnea had been running out there for over 2 years and never once seen one. Her running partner had stopped joining her on the weekend runs a few months earlier, and Linnea had kept going solo, which is kinda the number one thing every advisory tells you not to do. Her GoPro was recording continuously when she started the run around 6:15 p.m., planning a 7-mile out and back before dark. The trail was narrow, hemmed in by chaparral and scrub oak, with limited sight lines around switchbacks. The sun was already dropping behind the ridgeline as she reached the turnaround. Shadows had begun pooling in the draws and gullies along the trail, reducing visibility significantly on the return leg. Running alone on a narrow mountain trail at dusk in confirmed cougar territory. I've read the advisories, I've seen the signs at trailheads, and I know she saw them too. But 2 years of nothing happening has a way of making danger feel theoretical. The sign stops being a warning and starts being scenery. Mountain lions are ambush predators that rely on concealment and short explosive bursts. Adults commonly weigh between 100 and 200 pounds. Running appears to trigger pursuit instinct, and lone individuals on narrow trails at dusk represent among the highest risk profiles for fatal encounters. Cougars typically attack from behind, targeting the neck and head. GoPro footage recovered from the scene shows Linnea rounding a tight switchback on the return leg. A large cougar was partially visible in the scrub beside the trail, barely distinguishable in the fading light. The footage is stable and clear, the chest mount doing exactly what it's designed to do, and honestly that steadiness makes it worse. Linnea stops abruptly. She does not turn or run. She backs up slowly, consistent with recommended encounter protocol. The cougar does not retreat. After several seconds, the cougar begins advancing. Linnea shouts, raises her arms. The cougar continues closing distance. At roughly 8 feet, it lunges and the GoPro catches the impact. Then the struggle appears to move off the trail within seconds as the camera angle drops and audio continues recording. Investigators later noted the cougar appeared unusually habituated to human activity in the area. Linnea failed to return by nightfall. Her partner reported her missing. Los Angeles County search and rescue teams began combing the trail network before sunrise, deploying helicopter support at first light. She was located on the trail the following morning. The GoPro was recovered intact. Injuries were consistent with predatory cranial and neck bites from a large adult cougar. The animal was subsequently located and euthanized by wildlife officers. Investigators later referenced the incident during regional trail safety discussions about solo running at dusk in cougar habitat. The GoPro just kept recording because that's what it was built to do. Pointed at dirt and scrub, audio still running, long after the person wearing it was gone. There's something about footage that outlives the person it was strapped to that I genuinely cannot sit with comfortably. California's footage is steady and clear because the camera was designed to be. In Malawi, the footage is the opposite. A phone propped against a wall in the dark, recording whatever walks through the gap in the fence. The camera wasn't on a person this time. It was waiting for an animal, and the animal showed up. It was June 29th, 2016, and the dry season had settled over southern Malawi. A clan of spotted hyenas had been coming into a rural village near the Lawand area pretty much every night for weeks at that point, taking chickens, a goat, at least one dog, and honestly just making life miserable for everyone living on that edge of the settlement. Villagers had reinforced their livestock enclosures, but the hyenas kept finding ways in. Chisomo Balaka was a 19-year-old subsistence farmer's son living with his family in a mud brick home at the village edge, closest to the bush. The hyenas had been heard around his family's compound on multiple nights, and the clan had gotten increasingly bold after weeks of nobody managing to drive them off for good. Other families further from the bush had started bringing livestock indoors at night, but Chisomo's family didn't have the space, and the reed fence around their compound was really the only barrier between their animals and whatever came out of the bush after dark. Chisomo decided he was going to film the hyena when it came back. He propped his phone against the base of the compound wall with the camera facing the gap in the reed fence where the animals had been getting in, planning to post the footage to show what his village was dealing with. He positioned himself near the gap with a heavy stick, planning to drive the animal off while the phone recorded. His mother and younger siblings were inside with the door braced, a 19-year-old kid propping his phone against a wall in the dark to film a hyena for social media. I understand the impulse completely, because at 19 you don't think the thing is actually going to come for you. You think you're going to get the footage and it's going to be wild and everyone's going to see it. That confidence at that age isn't bravery, it's just not having enough experience yet to know what you're standing next to. Spotted hyenas are among Africa's most powerful predators, with jaw strength capable of crushing bone. Adults weigh between roughly 90 and 140 pounds. Despite their reputation as scavengers, spotted hyenas are primarily active predators, responsible for the majority of their own kills. When habituated to village environments through repeated livestock predation, they lose natural avoidance of humans. Attacks on people standing alone at night are documented across Malawi, Mozambique, and Ethiopia. After midnight, the sounds started, these low whooping calls coming from the bush, then heavy footsteps right outside the compound wall that you could apparently hear through the mud brick. The phone's footage, which was recovered the next morning, shows a large hyena pushing through the gap in the fence. Chisomo stepped toward the opening before the animal had fully entered the compound. He swung the stick. The first hyena circled briefly after the initial swing before lunging low toward his legs. Chisomo went down. A second hyena entered through the same gap almost immediately. The attack involved both animals. Chisomo's screams brought neighbors running with flashlights and burning sticks. The hyenas retreated into the darkness when multiple people arrived with fire and noise. The phone battery died shortly after the attack. Neighbors found Chisomo with severe bite wounds, including catastrophic facial and upper thigh injuries. The nearest clinic was really far, way too far to walk, so villagers carried him on a makeshift stretcher toward the nearest road where a vehicle could meet them. It was over an hour before they reached transport. Chisomo survived the initial journey and received treatment at a district clinic, but the wound infections that followed proved too severe. He died 4 days later from infection-related complications and blood loss. The phone just sat there against the wall recording an empty compound in the dark after everyone had gone. Low-light footage, barely visible, just the sounds of the village in the distance, and then nothing. That image of the phone still recording after the attack, after Chisomo was carried away, that one followed me home from this story. Only still frames from the phone footage surfaced publicly. The full video was described by investigators but never officially released. The hyena clan was not captured. Officials cited the need for improved livestock enclosures and human-wildlife conflict support in the district. Malawi's footage is dark and partial, and the phone dies before the night is over. India's footage is the opposite. A security camera mounted above a shop entrance in early morning light, recording part of the dirt lane outside the shop that looks completely normal until it isn't. It was June 9th, 2017, and the summer heat was sitting heavy over a rural village on the edge of Uttarakhand's forest belt in northern India. The village backed up against dense sal forest, and the boundary between settlement and wilderness was basically just a dirt road with fields on one side and trees on the other. Leopard activity around the village had been getting worse for months. Livestock kills were happening pretty regularly along the tree line. There had been at least 2 sightings of a leopard moving through the village after dark, once by a group of teenagers, and once after dogs started barking near the water pump around 3 a.m. Forest department officials had set cage traps but hadn't caught anything. People were kinda just living with it and hoping it would move on. Devendra Rawat, 34, was a dairy farmer who lived with his family in a concrete house on the village's southern edge, closest to the tree line. His routine every morning was to walk roughly 200 meters down the main village path to his cattle shed before sunrise. His wife had asked him more than once to wait until full daylight before going out, but Devendra had been making that walk for years and had never seen anything bigger than a jackal. That was basically the attitude across the whole village. Everyone knew the leopard was around, but most people still believed attacks on adults were unlikely. A small security camera above the entrance to a neighbor's shop covered about 40 feet of the path, installed after a break-in the previous year. The footage quality was basic and grainy, the kind of cheap security setup you see all over rural India. The camera had a low-quality built-in microphone, mostly useful for picking up nearby voices. What gets me about this one is how normal the footage looks right up until the last second. It's just a guy walking down a dirt path in the early morning. Same path he walks every day, and there is nothing in the frame that tells you what's about to happen. Just a man and a path, and then suddenly not. Indian leopards are among the most adaptable large predators on Earth, thriving in close proximity to dense human settlement. Adults typically weigh between 70 and 160 pounds depending on sex and region. Leopards routinely move through villages at night using walls and compound structures as cover. Most attacks come from concealment with virtually no warning, and the most serious injuries involve bites to the neck, head, or upper shoulders. The security footage shows Devendra walking into the frame from the right at approximately 5:40 a.m. The light is just barely coming up, and the path is kinda dim with long shadows along the compound walls. He's walking at a normal pace, nothing unusual. About 3 seconds after he enters the frame, a leopard comes from behind a low compound wall to his left and hits him before he can even turn his head. The leopard struck from concealment at close range, consistent with ambush attack behavior documented in previous leopard incidents across rural India. Devendra went to the ground immediately. The footage shows the animal biting down on his neck and upper shoulder area and appeared to begin dragging him toward the tree line before the camera's field of view cuts off. Neighbors heard the commotion and came running within less than a minute because the houses were close together and people were already alert about the leopard. The leopard released Devendra when the group approached with sticks and flashlights, retreating into the tree line. Devendra had sustained deep puncture wounds to his neck and severe lacerations across his shoulders. He was conscious when neighbors reached him, but was losing blood fast and going in and out of consciousness. Villagers loaded loaded him into a vehicle and drove toward the nearest district hospital, roughly 40 minutes away on partially unpaved roads. Medical staff attempted emergency treatment and surgical intervention upon arrival. Devendra died during emergency treatment from severe blood loss and neck trauma. 40 minutes to a hospital. In a city that's an annoying commute. Out there, it's the difference between living and not. I keep thinking about that drive. Devendra in the back of somebody's car with puncture wounds in his neck. 40 minutes from a surgeon who might still have been able to help him. The long transport probably reduced his chances even further. Forest Department officials launched a capture operation after the attack. A leopard was trapped in a trap cage near the village 4 days later, but officials could not confirm it was the same animal. The security footage circulated in local media and was referenced in discussions about human-wildlife conflict mitigation measures in the district. India gave me a security camera that caught something rarely captured clearly on a path nobody thought was dangerous. Sri Lanka gave me the opposite. A dozen phones pointed at something everyone could see coming, and it still wasn't enough to stop what happened next. It was March 22, 2015, and the afternoon sun was hot and bright on a rural road cutting through paddy fields on the outskirts of a village in the southern province of Sri Lanka. The road ran parallel to the boundary of a national park, and wild elephants crossing between the park and nearby water sources was pretty much a daily occurrence during the dry months when the smaller ponds dried up and animals had to move further to drink. Human-elephant conflict in Sri Lanka had been escalating for years. Habitat loss was pushing elephants closer to villages and farmland, and fatal encounters were happening at a rate of roughly 80 to 100 people per year. Most incidents happened near park boundaries where elephants crossed regularly, and people had basically gotten used to seeing them. Motorcyclists drove around them on the shoulder. Kids watched them from 50 feet away like it was entertainment. Chaminda Wickramasinghe, 43, was a rice farmer riding his motorcycle home from the weekly market. His wife Niluka, 39, was on the back. The road was straight and flat with good visibility. Roughly 100 meters ahead, a group of people had gathered where a large bull elephant was standing in the middle of the road. Multiple bystanders were already filming on their phones, some of them maybe 30 or 40 feet from the elephant, which is way closer than anyone should be to a wild bull. The footage shows the elephant flapping its ears and doing this lateral swaying motion, which combined with the posture changes, basically any wildlife guide will tell you means the animal is agitated and wants space. Nobody was moving away. A couple of people were actually laughing about it, like the whole thing was just another roadside attraction. A dozen people standing 30 feet from a 6-ton animal that is clearly telling them to back off, and most of them had their phones out. I've watched the footage from multiple angles, and not one person is moving away, just standing there filming like there's a screen between them and the elephant, and there really isn't. Asian elephants are the largest land animals on the continent, with adult bulls weighing between 4 and 6 tons. Despite their size, they can accelerate to up to roughly 20 miles per hour over short distances. Bull elephants displaying ear flapping, head shaking, and lateral swaying are communicating agitation. Charges can escalate from bluff to genuine contact without warning. Direct contact with an adult bull elephant is frequently fatal. Chaminda slowed his motorcycle as he approached the group. The elephant was still in the road, blocking passage. Rather than stopping and waiting, Chaminda tried to ride around it on the dirt shoulder, which is honestly what pretty much everyone in the area did because it was kinda just how things worked. You waited for a gap, and you went around. Multiple phone cameras were recording as the motorcycle passed to the elephant's left at roughly 15 to 20 feet. The elephant turned toward the motorcycle as it passed. Bystander footage shows the animal pivoting and charging within seconds. The motorcycle was not moving fast enough to clear the distance. The elephant struck the motorcycle from the side, throwing both riders off the road. Chaminda took the main impact and was thrown into the roadside ditch. The elephant followed him off the road and struck him at least once more on the ground. The footage becomes chaotic at this point. Cameras shaking, people screaming, but at least 2 angles show the elephant standing over Chaminda for several seconds before moving away. Niluka landed separately and suffered a broken arm, but was able to crawl away from the road. By the time the elephant moved away less than a minute later, Chaminda had sustained massive blunt force trauma to his chest and head. Villagers reached him immediately. He was unresponsive. He was transported to the nearest hospital and pronounced dead on arrival, while his wife Niluka survived and was treated at the same hospital. Multiple phone videos circulated widely on Sri Lankan social media within hours and were picked up by international outlets within days. Wildlife officials noted the elephant was a known individual involved in previous crop raiding incidents. The animal was not captured or relocated. An elephant, not hiding, not ambushing, not doing anything that wasn't completely visible to everyone standing right there with a phone. The animal was in the road, clearly agitated, clearly warning every person around it to back off, and a man on a motorcycle tried to go around it because that's what people in that area always did. The footage exists from multiple angles, and not one bystander thought to wave Chaminda off before he drove past. I've watched all of it, and I'm still not sure what I expected any of them to do differently, because when you've seen elephants on that road 100 times and nothing happened, the 101st time doesn't feel any different until it is.